Hi, everybody. Welcome to February 2023 Practical Knowledge Series hosted by BioStrategy Partners. I am Bryan, the Program Director for BioStrategy Partners, and welcome to this panel on non-dilutive funding. Do want to do a couple of housekeeping stuff before we go start. So a little bit about BioStrategy Partners. We are a nonprofit academic consortium of different research institutes and universities in the greater Philadelphia region, as well as an international presence at Duke and US. Our mission is to advance early stage technologies into the commercial place. We have a couple programs surrounding that mission, and feel free to reach out to me at this email if you have any questions. Okay. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Armstrong Teasdale, CBRE, MVM Associates, and Meniscus Limited for allowing us to host this practical knowledge series years on end. So it's very appreciable. Okay. So the format today will be about 45 to 50 minutes of panel discussion, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of question and answers. If we do get a lot of questions in the chat, I will perhaps stop it a little early so that we can get to the audience questions. But please, when you come in, mute your mic. Feel free to put your institution in your name so that we can see, so the panelists can see who you're talking to if you have a question. And as I put in here, please put your questions in the chat, and then I'll kind of monitor them and bring it up as the discussion gets going. Okay. So with that said, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Kelly Wylam, Earle Hager, and Mike McCann, who are experts in the non-dilutive funding area. And I would just like them to introduce themselves. Kelly, go ahead.
Hi, good to see you all. My name is Kelly Wylam. I'm the Executive Director of Pennsylvania's statewide Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer, SBIR and STTR program. We have over 18 organizations that are partners in the Innovation Partnership, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Earle, go ahead.
My name is Earle Hager. I'm the managing partner of the Neutrino Donut, a consulting organization out of LA, doing projects in Pennsylvania and a bunch of other states with a focus on the SBIR process and helping startups understand how to use the SBIR process to move from government funding, but also advancing into the venture space.
All right, thank you. Mike, you're next.
Having trouble getting my mute off. Hi, my name is Mike McCann. I'm the president of MVM Associates. We help companies identify, manage, sell, and transfer tax credits, especially a lot of young startup companies, which I think is a good audience for this talk. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the very brief introduction. I appreciate it. I'm very excited to dive into today's discussion on fundraising approaches, specifically non-dilutive fundraising approaches for founders, entrepreneurs, academic researchers looking to advance your technologies into the marketplace. So non-dilutive funding, just a little bit of a definition, is generally described as funding a company receives without giving any equity or ownership in a company to someone else. So examples of non-dilutive funding includes federal and state grants, tax credits, and there's also a lot of resources, free resources that are available for you that you could utilize to help translate your technology. Something equally important, like I mentioned, are the programs in the startup ecosystem, such as the greater Philadelphia region. There are a lot of resources available for entrepreneurs to reach out and get. Okay. So our experts today will describe the supporting programs available to help entrepreneurs, and as well as various federal and state non-dilutive funding programs, including the tax credits and the best practices for writing a successful grant. Okay, so first I'd like to start at the place where a lot of the inventions are created. There we go. And this is usually at a university. When a researcher develops intellectual property with potential commercialization, where do they start? So Kelly, I would like to pitch this to you. what are some resources available for principal investigators, researchers to utilize when they have a technology? How do they learn about commercialization?
Sure. Do you want to advance the slide there, Bryan? So I have it. There you go. So the other resources that are clearly beneficial and they provide value add related services, some of which are essential to preparing for receiving investments or preparing proposals for potential funding opportunities. So for example, we have our small business development centers at Temple University, Widener University, Lehigh University, and other universities throughout the Commonwealth. The small business development centers are an invaluable resource as a starting point for companies that or entrepreneurs and or researchers and or companies that are currently existing to take a look at how they develop their business plan. And this can be focused around their individual project or research that will eventually become a product, service, an AI application. We could go on and on with examples of anything that would be commercializable, and commercializable can mean that you're developing it for sale to a pharmaceutical company, for instance. So that's commercializing. It's not just getting a product, a consumer product on the market. So, you know, they have other resources as well. Coincidental to the small business development centers are our Apex Accelerator Centers, which were previously referred to as Procurement and Technology Assistance Centers, the PTAC centers. One of the things that's really important there is help with federal registrations. And I'm going to put the contact information for the local Philadelphia PTAC individual in the chat for you. So hopefully that's information that's available. Clearly, the other resources that are available there are our Innovation Partnership, which is the statewide SBIR STTR assistance program. You can take a look. I'll put that in the chat as well. Funding is also available that is not necessarily non-dilutive, but investment funding from life sciences greenhouses, such as BioAdvance and PA Life Sciences Investment, and then our Ben Franklin Technology Partners. So that would be investment instead of non-dilutive, but the interest rates tend to be significantly better than market rate. And there are a ton of value-added business assistance growth services that those organizations and entities also provide to as a business is going along its life cycle. So that's pretty much the resources there. And you want to Google those and go to those websites and read more about those resources in the greater Philadelphia region.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention the university tech transfer offices.
Yes.
I do want to emphasize that the folks at the tech transfer offices would always be a resource for you. You can rely on them. Their job is to find potential technologies for commercialization and make sure that it gets there. If you reach out and they have a lot of information that will be made available to you, even if they cannot help you directly, they will connect you to folks that will help you. So reach out to, yeah.
Right. It's also important to check with the tech transfer office to ensure that you're conforming to the terms and agreements of your employment contract and the IP contracts at the university, if you're working with university IP and all those sorts of great things. So absolutely, Bryan.
All right. Thank you, Kelly, for that additional information. So moving into, like, if you have an early stage startup, what are some resources available for entrepreneurs and or inventors to utilize during this stage? Kelly, I'll pass that to you as well.
I'm sorry, what did you say again? You broke up a little bit there.
Oh, sorry. So if, for example, if the academic researcher has an early stage technology or early stage startup, what are some resources available for them to utilize so that they can learn about entrepreneurship and also learn about how to translate this technology.
So at each of the, especially if you're at a university, but one of the regional resources that is available in the Greater Philadelphia region, the NSF Innovation Core, or the I-Core program, is a fantastic resource for understanding, learning about, and understanding what you're doing with your company, what you plan to do with your company, what the innovation is that you are developing, and its demand, its need, its interest from primary and secondary customers. One of the great benefits of the I-Core program is their customer discovery section of their program. There are regional programs and a national program. The regional program, this is the NSF, the Northeast. If you want to go to the next screen, thank you, is the National Innovation Network of I-Core. So there's a regional hub somewhere in the country, and again, it operates on a regional footprint. So if you were looking to engage with the NSF I-Core hub in the Northeast region, these are the participating institutions. And again, it's university tied, again, because of the Tech Transfer Office and all of the great and fantastic programs that the individual universities have developed to support entrepreneurship and spinning out those technologies and innovations at the university level. So those are the entities and organizations that are involved in the Northeast Hub, but NSF I-Core also has sites and nodes as well. So if you want to go to the next slide, a little bit, nope, the next slide, the next one, there we go. A little bit more about the Northeast Hub. You want to explore whether or not your technology has the possibility to make an impact, or you're able to have customers or grow the business and be successful. There's eligibility. I know it says the team has at least 2 that are involved, but typically they like to see 3 folks. And if you go to the engage or the icore.org for the Northeast there, it'll spell out for you exactly what each component piece they're looking for a team, and who should be included in the team, and what sort of skills that they're going to bring to the team. There are training sessions, there are web-based training sessions, they're in-person. They used to have in-person training sessions because of the dispersed nature of the hub. I think that they're doing a lot of it virtually, but they, as far as I know, you need to be committed to attend those meetings. There is no pass on it. If you're engaged and you get accepted to participate in their program, you need to participate in the program. So next slide, please. So this is an example. This is included not just as a support mechanism for non-dilutive funding and to grow technologies and innovations and assist entrepreneurs, but there are aspects of this that provide non-dilutive funding, right? So if you're participating in the regional I-Core hub, there's a $3,000 to help explore and do the customer discovery. The national program is up to $50,000 in terms of award. That involves even a greater level of commitment because you need to go and physically do that in person. Now that we're back doing things in person, they have those sessions in person. Then clearly the preparation here is leading into SBIR and STTR. So if you've done your customer discovery and the like, and you've used the I-Core program, actually the dollar amount for NSF phase 1 awards is now $275,000. And then a phase 2 award, which builds upon phase 1 executed work, could be $1 million. And that is non-dilutive because those are grants. So that's all grant funding that you're seeing here. I did want to note before we move along to the next presenter that while the Northeast had those individual participating entities, you should note as well that there are I-Corps site programs, there are individual programs at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as if you were interested in reaching out to, or you're located in the area of Carnegie Mellon University, University of Pittsburgh, and Penn State University, all have individual I-Corps site programs. So it's not just the hub programs for the Northeast Hub, there are individual site assistance programs as well.
Great, thank you for the description of the I-Corps program. And having gone through I-Corps 3 times, 2 times local and then 1 national time myself, it's very useful. You learn a lot, but it's also very intensive, time intensive. They do require you to commit your time to that. I can't recommend it enough to people who want to learn about entrepreneurship. Okay, so on that note, learning about entrepreneurship and understanding the market can only get you so far, especially startups focused on R&D that require significant capital to advance your technologies and grow those startups. As we've mentioned, there are various non-dilutive fundraising approaches such as grants and tax credits. I want to focus in a little bit on tax credits and talk about why they're such a great and, in my opinion, often underappreciated programs that can help grow the company. So, Mike, could you please discuss some of the tax credit opportunities?
Sure. So first, before we get to this slide, let's talk about what a tax credit is, just very quickly, make sure people understand. So a tax credit, unlike a tax deduction, is a dollar for dollar credit to offset a tax liability that you owe, let's say, versus a tax deduction, which is a lowering of the amount of taxable income that you owe. So these are very valuable. You know, if you owe taxes, you can utilize these directly against it. And the reason they exist, the state, local, and federal governments create these tax credit programs to incentivize certain things. So, for example, you know, low-income housing tax credits, they're created at the federal and state level to incentivize building more low-income housing, or, you know, research and development tax credits, right? They're incentivizing companies to invest more into research and development. So they're created to incentivize activity. But then once you have a tax credit, many times, especially with people who are likely viewing this topic today, you're a young company, you don't have a really big tax liability. So you could get, let's say, $100,000 tax credit for research and development activities, but you don't have taxable liability to use it against. So states like Pennsylvania and New Jersey and some others have allowed companies to essentially sell these tax credits in order to monetize it. So that means you, as the entity which has received the tax credit, who does not have a tax liability to use it against, sells it to a third party, often a very large company, a lot of insurance companies, you know, Nestle or Apple or whoever, buy these credits at a discounted rate. You, the company, small company, gets the cash. They get a tax credit at a discounted rate, which saves them a little on their taxes. It's a win-win. So these are transferable or sellable tax credits I'm going to talk to you about today. Bryan, if you go to the next slide, please. So let's start off with, well, what can you use them for? In Pennsylvania, in some states, you're required to use them for certain activities. In Pennsylvania, which is what I'll talk about today, you can utilize the proceeds from the sale of your credits for what you need it for as a business. Very flexible. So it could be working capital, paying off debt, you know, hire and train employees, expanding your business. You know, a lot of companies use it to hire employees or to buy pieces of equipment that they need to grow their business. So these are very valuable for small businesses. And as Bryan said, they're non-dilutive. Next slide, please. So the two ones I'll talk about today, which I think are most applicable in Pennsylvania, are the Keystone Innovation Zone Tax Credit, or KIZ, and the Research and Development Tax Credit, or R&D. Next slide, please. So I think the first one's the KIZ. Yeah, so the Keystone Innovation Zone Tax Credit, or KIZ, is available to companies in Pennsylvania that are less than 8 years old. They are biotech, life sciences, or manufacturing companies, technology companies that have their own intellectual property, or they have proprietary software, proprietary technology that they've developed. You have to be located within a Keystone Innovation Zone, which we'll get to where those are in a second. And the tax credit is equal to 50% of your year-over-year increase in revenues, up to $100,000. So you can, you know, so for your 8 years, you start in the first year, you have a second year. So in your third year, so from your third through your 8th year, so for 5 years, you could conceivably get
someone who was so critical in your life.
I think somebody's got to be turned off there. Yeah. you could conceivably get $100,000 a year of these tax credits for 5 years, would be very valuable to your business. Bryan, you want to go to the next one, please? So where are these tax credits? So Bryan is the manager of the BioLaunch 611 KIZ, which is run by BioStrategy Partners. If you look at the gray area here, you'll see that's a very large area, and all of the geography in there is in a KIZ. So if you're in Philadelphia, that's everything north of Girard Avenue and everything west of I-95, as you can see. And then the eastern border is Route 202 all the way up to New Jersey. So essentially everything east of 202 and north of Route 30 through Philadelphia is in the KIZ. So if you are located in this area, or you're considering locating your business, you should consider, say, hey, this is an area where we could locate our business. You must have an office. You can't run it out of your house. So it has to be an office location. So I would recommend anybody who has this type of company to lease a space within a KIZ. Next slide, please. The other one, we'll talk about two more. The University City KIZ, like you say, it's a big bubble around the University City Science Center. And then from Market to Locust. And actually, it's been extended. This is an old one. It goes all the way down to Old City, so basically to the river, and then a little north into Old City. So any geography in there is also in a KIZ. Most of the Navy Yard is in a KIZ. Chester County, Delaware County also have individual parcels that are in KIZs. And the KIZ programs are managed by KIZ coordinators. As I mentioned, Bryan is the KIZ coordinator for the BioLaunch 611, the big one we showed before. Alafia Simmons from the University City Science Center is the KIZ coordinator for this KIZ. And then there's others for the Delaware Chester County KIZs. We can get you that information. So next is the research and development tax credit. So the research and development tax credit is basically the same credit as you get at the federal level, because there's federal research and development tax credits, except in Pennsylvania, it qualifies if the activity has occurred in Pennsylvania and you've spent the money in Pennsylvania. So they do a two-part test. And the good thing about the state credit is, like the KIZ credit, you can sell that credit for cash to generate for your business. So if you're incurring what they call qualified research expenditures, right? If you're developing a new drug, if you're creating a new medical device, if you're building a new software, and you're investing time to obviously do discovery and do research and developing of that product, most of those expenditures, or some of those expenditures, are going to qualify. At the federal level, it's roughly 8 to 10% of your total amount spent that qualifies. In Pennsylvania, it's based on an increase from year to year. Without going too much into the details, it's about 20% of the difference between your second year and your year before. There's a little more technical than that, but I won't get into all that. But the thing is if you're investing in developing a product, you should be talking to your accountant, or we work with Bowers R&D, who's a specialty tax company, to have someone look at these expenditures and making sure you're documenting them and that you're qualifying for these. Next slide, please. I talked a little bit. Let's talk a little more. The federal credit. So the federal credit is the same as the state. In fact, this federal IRS 41 or IRC 41B is the qualified expenses. This is how you determine what you're eligible for. The great thing about the federal credit is they've changed it recently. If you qualify as a startup, a small business, which I don't have exactly what the requirements are. I think you're less than 5 years old and less than $50 million in revenues, you can utilize the credit that you generate against 100% of the Social Security and Medicare taxes. So instead of paying your employer portion of your Social Security and Medicare, you can take this R&D credit and you can use it so that you don't have to pay that as the employer. So the federal credit you can't sell like the state credit, but you can use it to offset expenses that you're going to have to pay in those other taxes. So they're tremendously valuable for companies, and all companies who qualify should be looking into it. Is that the last slide, or?
Yes.
And that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So something that's very important for entrepreneurs and founders is the time sensitivity around these tax credits. What does the timeline look like for obtaining these tax credits, and what can they expect?
Great question, because what as Bryan said, what often happens is small young companies, because they don't know about them or just unsure about them, they may miss some deadlines. So the way the KIZ and the Pennsylvania State R&D work, or you apply for them on an annual basis for your prior year. So right now you would be applying for 2022, which just passed. And those 2022 applications are due on December 1st of 2023. You cannot go back. If you miss those deadlines, you'll lose that year. So it's important to start thinking about it now to see if you can qualify. As when you're starting, what you want to look at is for both programs, you have a base year, that's the first year you qualify, and you have a comparable year, which is the second year. So if you think about the KIZ program, it's based on 50% of your year-over-year increase in revenues. So you want to get into a KIZ in a base year as early as you can. You probably have very little, if any, revenues, so you'd like them to be close to zero. So if you are not currently in a KIZ, you may want to consider getting into it and start becoming qualified. You have to get approved through Bryan or through your KIZ coordinator because there's reporting requirements. So you don't want to miss those things. And similarly with the research and development tax credits, you want to start documenting in the year that you do them, the first year, so you don't miss them and miss qualifying that first year that you could apply for them. So.
Okay, thank you. So Mike, you also mentioned about how it's increasing revenue over years. Could you talk about what can be counted as revenue in those reporting?
Another great question. Thank you. Yeah, so for the KIZ program, grant, and you're maybe a young tech company. You're like, well, we don't have any revenues. We're still pre-revenue. We're still developing our product, but we just talked about the SBIR grants. Grants count as revenues. So any grants could be SBIR grants, could be local grants. Any grant qualifies as revenue. So when you're thinking about, hey, could I qualify for this? Make sure you take into consideration that the grant money will count as revenues. Now, conversely, with the R&D credits, an important thing to realize is you cannot count grant money as a qualified research expenditure, or that would always be double dipping because you're getting that grant money from a government source. So they don't want you then saying, oh, this is what I spent. So the R&D calculation is only going to be on your own money or investment money. It's not going to be on grant funds.
All right, again, thank you. And that's a great transition for us to move into SBIR, STTRs, which could help the company with both research and development and also commercialization of the technology. So SBIR is a small business innovation research, or STTR is small business technology transfer. And each year, NIH sets aside more than $3.6 billion to fund these two programs that require extensive details on the R&D plan, as well as the commercialization plan for the technology. And these are very different from your typical NIH and NSF grants that require a lot of different strategies to succeed. So Earle, I'll pass this to you. Could you define a little bit what SBIR, STTR is and what the difference between those are?
The overall goal of the government was to take 3% of the government research funding and focus on small businesses, hence the SBIR and STTR. The SBIR is focusing on a business that's a startup. It may license the technology from a university. The STTR is focusing more within the university. That's the basic difference. A small business is under 500 employees and all the interconnected companies, which is polite for GlaxoSmithKline can't start small businesses. They can license things out to a small business separately. There are the money is focused on phase 1 and phase 2. There's a couple of pieces to this. One is a thing called topics. You need to look up the different government agencies and find out what they're looking for and find whether your idea matches a topic. At that point, you can connect with a program manager, and there's certain application processes in which they're encouraging you to follow to make sure that they aren't stuck evaluating flux capacitors or anything else that's silly. So that's the bottom line on that. On the phase 1, they want you to prove that the science is valid. On the phase 2, they want you to commercialize it. That was a big sticking point with Rand Paul, and who was key in the passing of the SBIR reauthorization last September, was that there were a lot of places that were just doing the research and then dropping it. They want to see your product go to the marketplace. So the phase 1 is the science valid. Phase 2 is commercialization. There are more phase 1 grants given out, but the bigger money is in the phase 2. It is a great way to start a company. It's a great way to prep your ideas. Each government agency has their own SBIR programs, and I would be also would also point out that the military has their own program called CDMRP, which is congressionally delegated medical research programs. And the military funds lots of medical programs from infants all the way to aged, to old people. They have a lot of leeway in this, and they will take care of the warfighters. It is a very important program for them. So there's a lot of places to move on this. There's a lot of experts that will evaluate your technology. They will give you feedback, direction on your technology, as well as the business planning and the execution of the plan. At the end of it, you are more interesting to a venture capitalist for licensing, selling out, whatever the case may be. But it's an excellent source of initial money, and the numbers under NIH change, and for phase 1 and phase 2s, and other agencies also have their own thing. It would be worth, if you're dealing with medical technologies, to look within the National Science Foundation as well, because they're doing a lot of topics. So you have NIH, National Science Foundation, and also CDMRP. You can apply for the same ideas in multiple places. What is key is that if you have separate ideas, you can't have a PI doing multiple projects. They're the main issues on that piece of it. The bottom line is you really want to, this is worth pursuing if you are a startup. The topics are announced on a quarterly basis. The military CDMRP are announced on an annual basis, but you can always keep going back. If you fail, they will give you, and your idea was interesting, they will give you feedback with recommendations to fix these things so you can advance. It's best to get them in earlier in the time frame, because at a certain point there is a rolling approval process, and it gets a little more challenging to get your idea approved of late in the schedule than it would be in the earlier.
So what are some of the differences between SBIR and STTR? Could you describe that?
The main issue is that the SBIR is a startup and the STTR is staying within the university. The TT transfer. Kelly.
So yeah, I would say that the two main differences, the way I tend to articulate them, is that an SBIR project can include partnering with a research institution or an institution of higher education or nonprofit research institution. It can include that. They do some of the work, but in STTR, it's mandated that an institution, a research institution, be included in the project work. So that's the main difference. SBIR project can include partnering with the university to specific limits of project execution. STTR mandates that partnership.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
I would also add that the SBIR, your application would be enhanced if you have a university partner, because if you're doing the research, tapping into the labs gives a little bit more credibility to your planning. But that is also subject to university overhead rates, which run in the almost 60% range, I believe, for Penn, and similar for other organizations. But as Kelly pointed out, it has to exclusively stay within the university with the STTR. With the SBIR, you can use different universities for funding. The company needs to be controlled by 51% of a US citizen. There's a whole sam.gov application process, which everyone hates, but is part of the program to register who you are. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities here. We help companies evaluate what their paths forward are, and I would do that if anyone's interested, just chatting about what their ideas are at a later date.
Okay.
That's kind of, there's a lot to these things, but the bottom line is it's a non-dilutive funding. It is a great way to get your technology evaluated and also get funding on two levels. One is to get it started, and then the second level is to commercialize it.
Okay, thanks, Earle. I want to dive a little deeper into the process of crafting an SBIR STTR application. So as someone that knows nothing about writing an SBIR STTR grant, how do you find help? With the exception of reaching out to Earle, of course. Kelly, I'll pass this to you. Oh.
Sure. So as I noted in my introduction, the Innovation Partnership is a statewide SBIR STTR assistance program And we have over 18 entities and or organizations, which include University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, Temple, Penn, Pitt, CMU, Penn State University, University Science Center, Life Sciences Greenhouses, and the Small Business Development Centers, to name a few. So all of those supporting resources, as we noted in the beginning on that one resource page, as well as the tech transfer offices, right? They are all going to, the Innovation Partnership has been around for 20 years, providing assistance for SBIR and STTR clients. So any of those entities, hopefully, that you are interacting with for other value add services. So if you're working on your business plan with the Temple SBDC or the Widener SBDC or Lehigh University SBDC or any of the other ones, right? You want to mention to them specifically if you're in a deep space or deep technology space innovation area. Hey, we heard something about SBIR and STTR funding. Do you think we're at a point where we might want to entertain this, right? And then I have contacts that know about how the Innovation Partnership works at each of those entities. They will either provide starting information to gather information from that client and refer the client over to me for direct assistance. So we'll go from there. And then I have, the Innovation Partnership has something that we developed. It's an instrument called a pre-proposal, and that's specifically for phase 1 submitters. And I should note that Innovation Partnership typically assists first-time SBIR, STTR applicants and or applicants have tried to submit or submitted their proposal on their own and have been unsuccessful. So one of the things you need to look at when you're entertaining NIH as the agency that you may be looking to submit to, we can help you find the topic areas also, and sort of coach you and guide you in interacting with the agency. But I always like to say, if there's like a scale of 1 to 10, of 10 being the most difficult, from the soup to nuts, right? From starting the process of looking at SBIR and STTR and electronically submitting your proposal and including the registrations and everything else. NIH is pretty close up there to the 10, if 10's the more difficult agencies to submit to. So other agencies fall along the continuum of the 1 to 10 ease of submission and development of the proposal, but I think NIH is very challenging with my years doing it. So we can help with that, and our partner organizations can help with different aspects of your journey to achieve success with SBIR and STTR. And of course, Earle is one of our preferred providers to the Innovation Partnership. So he's included in the assistance process as well.
Earle, did you want to say something? Sorry, I cut you off earlier.
No, I think working with the local resources is a key starting point. There's also information that's out there on the announcement of the different projects to give you an idea of what the structure is. But as Kelly pointed out, NIH and all these organizations are very, very tough in their evaluations, and they have lots of really good ideas coming their way. So not only, there isn't a lot of chafe in the applicant pool. So every resource that's available and going through Kelly and the local resources would be key to getting started and have your best shot at getting it done. An overly simplified example would be if you have a device that's related to cancer treatment, you maybe not want to send it to the National Cancer Institute if they're looking for therapeutic solutions, but rather you want to work with a device area, which might give you a better opportunity for the funding. These are the kinds of things that that Kelly's group can help you understand and what needs to be done. But these proposals are pretty long and they're pretty extensive, and there's a lot of inside baseball associated with understanding the players and how important a certain idea is.
We definitely, through our experience, know that each agency has their own culture. Okay, so for instance, NIH proposals want the terminology used, and it's in their solicitation, which is their grant opportunity offering document that guides the whole proposal development process, but they ask for specific aims, right? So that's how things need to be phrased. That's what NIH wants to see. If you're applying to NSF, they want your lingo in the proposal to be project tasks that you're executing. And so there's a technology readiness level that DoD looks at. Again, there are nuances that are not necessarily always in black and white within the solicitation, and folks like myself and our other providers and Earle and folks that have been working with SBIR and STTR clients and preparing a competitive proposal for many years. I mean, we've come to understand certain nuances about the different cultures that exist not just in the agency itself, but the nuances of the SBIR programs, SBIR and STTR programs at the agencies, and how they differ and how they want to be communicated with even.
Okay.
Also go, the NIH, for example, have a longer window in which they can communicate with you. But if you're dealing with CDMRP on the military, there's a very, very specific window, and they will not respond outside of that window because legally they are enjoined from doing so. But I mean, it's part of the process. And, you know, again, this is the inside baseball stuff that you could really use the assistance with.
Okay, thank you both for the insights. So we are approaching question and answering. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and then I'll bring them up. And we will continue discussing if there are no more questions. I believe Heather Rose would like to jump in to chime in on the SBIR.
Oh yeah, so sorry, I am not going to turn on my camera because I have a head cold. I just wanted to say this is super informative, and I think everything everybody said was great. And I would like to reiterate the strength of working with tech transfer, even though it is self-serving because I am tech transfer. I am actually a specialist reviewer for the CDMRP, as is my colleague, Alexi. So they rely on us to review the translation section. And I don't know if people realize that they actually call in specialist reviewers for those sections, and they take it very serious that those are actually done properly. And if people do not take them seriously, you don't get points for those sections, and they have scoring criteria that need to be followed. So reach out to us as a resource, and we will happily fill out that section for and with you. And we know the scoring criteria, and we have templates that we'll use to help fill in and maximize your scores so that we can make sure we, you know, to the extent we can, just game the system for you, you know, and just to get those points, you know, just points you can get like any kind of grant you fill out. You don't want to miss points just for not paying attention to little things. And then also it helps us know where you're headed with your project when you're trying to do a translationally focused thing. And then that helps us get looped in sooner. I can definitely say that the people who work with us, they get the grants more successfully, more often than the people who don't, and when they work with us sooner too. I know that they get them. So that's all.
Yeah, Heather, you brought up something very important. Timing. Reading and following instructions is paramount. Tapping into the resources that we have available to us is paramount, but timing is extremely important. You can't throw together one of these proposals in a weekend, right? You can't get the feedback of Heather's group and her colleagues in, you know, overnight, those sorts of things. So timing is extremely important to prepare and have enough runway to get the help that you need, to interact with the people that you need to interact with, should be interacting with, and be involved in feedback loops as well. A feedback loop, again, doesn't turn itself around when you're asking somebody to read and give input on something. It doesn't typically turn around in 10 minutes or an hour. So we need to be conscious of, if you getting the assistance is one thing, having all these people on your team and on your side to make sure that you're submitting the most competitive proposal you can is extremely important, but you also need to be conscious of timing and everybody's ability to assist you.
Yeah, and grant support can be money really well spent, right?
Yeah, great points about the timing, Kelly. So if I were to start a grant from scratch, what would be the timeline for me to reach out to you and Earle?
Right. So with Innovation Partnership, right, we have our own, like I said, pre-proposal that we want to assist with. And that pre-proposal really helps flush out the core competency areas that are demanded to be more fully addressed in the client's actual federal proposal. So for instance, there's a NIH deadline coming up on April 5th. I started working with many clients in December towards that, November and December, towards that April 5th submission deadline. In the last 3 days now, the Innovation Partnership pre-proposal deadline to get a technical review and feedback is typically, and it's on our website, 4 weeks prior to the federal deadline. That's when the pre-proposal needs to be in good shape. I would need to see a first draft of that pre-proposal at the 6-week point. And again, we need to consider these timeframes because things like System for Awards Management, which is an important federal registration that you must have preliminary to being able to electronically submit your proposal, you must have that confirmation back. It can take upwards of 30 days or more to receive that SAM registration confirmation. That's just one. There's ERA Commons for NIH. So if you're closer than 30 days away from the deadline for NIH, I'm gnashing my teeth for you, hoping that you'll be able to secure those federal registrations. Okay, because once you push those buttons, it's sort of out of your control. I mean, we do have, and I posted earlier, our Apex Center contacts are very familiar. They help with government contracting and tons of different registrations, and they're very hands-on and will help guide the process. But even they, with their direct contacts at these, at the federal registration offices, may not be able to, move it along any faster. So, just like you have long-range planning and you have your business plan, you want to consider potential funding in SBIR and STTR in your business model, in your business plan, right? How you're going to acquire funds, what type of funds are you looking to acquire? How much funding do you think you're going to need to develop it to a prototype level or to a benchtop level, or the full commercialization model, right? So that planning is just as important, having enough time to craft and submit the federal proposal and work with Heather and her group and work with the technology transfer offices and get the SBDC assistance and get the assistance of the Innovation Partnership, and then work with a preferred provider like Earle. So all of that is going on. We estimate first-time applicants to SBIR and STTR can take them anywhere from 80 to 150 hours in that soup to nuts sort of time frame. How much commitment is necessary to an effort to put into some preparing and submitting a competitive proposal.
I would add to Kelly's comments, you want their feedback, and you want your feedback on your good proposal. And if you don't get the job done and you're rushing to get it done, you may not get any comment back. But if you take the time and do it right and get the thorough proposal, even if you fail, you have a better chance of getting feedback from them on what you need to improve upon. And the second piece of inside baseball is many times these different reviewers read their sections only, and you kind of have to write the story in a self-contained way, so that if you're doing in different areas, you have to think, what do the different people reading this area need to know? And if there's a little repetition into the process, that may be helpful to you in your in your writing of the proposal. But the
Okay.
bottom line is don't submit a bad proposal. Submit your best shot so you get the feedback you need to do it right. Because if it fails, you can submit the next go round.
Right, and that's great advice, Earl, because I will note that many times if clients are submitting their first try to the NIH on their own without any kind of support, outward support or anything, they find their way to the innovation partnership, and we greatly benefit from the reviewer feedback. If they got scored, if they got reviewed and there was reviewer feedback, that clearly is a better starting point for our assistance or for anyone's assistance to move and try to help recalibrate the next submission, right? So if you're submitting again and you're resubmitting that, it's extremely helpful. So even if you're, just like Earl said, you want to submit regardless, you want to submit the best proposal you can, put that best foot forward to make sure you're at least getting, if you're not getting the award, you're at least getting that critical feedback for resubmission purposes.
Great, thank you for those points. I do have an audience question here. So beyond just planning ahead, are there other criteria that's under the applicant's control that they can do to set them up for success?
I would think using the I-Corps program to reach out for industry partners and getting letters of support for your phase 1 grant would be of value. That's one of the values of the whole entire I-Corps process.
And what's the best way to look for industry partners, mentors?
Calling them. You create relationships with these people who are looking for outside assistance. There are groups within every organization that are looking for innovation, and if you find those people, and LinkedIn is a fabulous tool for this, you can reach out to them and use them and say whether they're interested in doing it. Larger companies usually don't want to get involved in that stuff early, but smaller companies might be more interested in chatting with you or providing that letter of support. But generally reaching out to these folks. The I-Corps program itself is a good entryway. A lot of times people use the I-Corps program to go out to exhibits and shows, et cetera, and then they can meet 80 people and spend time with the 20 people they care about.
Well, I think too, again, I'm going to harken back to my comments about our SBDCs being invaluable resources, specifically for our small and or growing businesses. Because again, they've been around a long time. They do have sector specific contacts, right? So they have other clients that they've worked with, and they have sector specific knowledge, and they may be good to bounce ideas off of too and say, hey, you know, I'm looking to speak with somebody that I believe fits this primary customer profile. Do you have any clients or contacts in this sector specific space? And they can be very good connectors. Also, our folks at our other entities like the University City Science Center, right? They have lots of different assistance programs and are involved in many different sectors. And, you know, as Mike pointed out, they're part of that Keystone Innovation Zone there. And you know, so they have their fingers on the pulse of a lot of entrepreneurial, tech-based entrepreneurial endeavors as well. And I would say any of the folks on that resource page that we listed in the beginning, you could reach out to any of them, even, you know, our membership organizations, to see if they can make a referral to you. You can't be afraid to ask for help. You know, especially in this area, because letters of support and interest are expected to accompany the SBIR and STTR. It shows that you understand your marketplace. It shows that you understand your competitive space. It shows that you've given consideration to that, and that it's not a science fair project that you're proposing, right? It shows that there's teeth to your technology, your innovation, and you've spent the time and done the work to find out who might be interested. Once you get your innovation to an entertaining level where they might want to try it, might be a beta tester, you know, those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. So we have about 3 minutes left. I would like to let the panelists have some closing remarks. I'll pass it to you, Mike, first. And since we didn't get to you about how to ensure the applicant would be successful, so could you kind of close on talking about how an applicant or a company can situate themselves so that they can obtain these tax credits?
Sure. So I would recommend from a high level that if you're like, okay, well, where can I find out more about these programs? So the programs come from the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. If you Google, you know, the programs at DCE, it will take you right to their pages with the guidelines and the law. You do as much research as you'd like to. But as you get down into it, for the KIZ tax credits, I would recommend, depending on where you are in Pennsylvania, which KIZ you're in, get in touch with your coordinator. As I said, for the Bio 611 KIZ, it's Bryan. For the University City KIZ, it's Alapia Simmons. It's Patrick Hayakawa for the Delaware County and Chester County KIZs. But get in touch with those coordinators to talk about your company and who you are, what you're doing, what the qualifications are. That would be my number one recommendation, and do it soon. And then you can always come to, you know, consultants like us if you have additional questions, or we have people who can help you with the research and development ones as well, with what you need to do. So.
Great, thank you, Mike. And Earle, I'll pass it to you. If we could close with like a minute.
This is an outstanding program. It's been around for years. It's such a great program. As we like to joke, Donald Trump didn't mess with it. But it's a way of advancing your technology. It's a way of getting funded. It's a way of getting moving science forward. And it's been very successful for a long time. And I highly recommend getting started with the local resources that can help you with your connections in the process, and go from there.
Great, thank you. Kelly, did you want to add anything?
I just would add, I'm gonna put my link information there to the Innovation Partnership, and you can read about what our program is about. I don't think I went into that much detail. There is a process involved in our assistance. It is all free. We like you submit a grant proposal almost yearly to keep Innovation Partnership funding program going, as well as all of our partner entities. And I would encourage you to reach out to me if you get a chance and you're interested in learning more. If nothing else, just keep my contact information handy. And when you are at a point where you think you're interested, we can schedule a call.
Thank you, Kelly. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining this meeting, panel discussion. It's been very informative for me as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Bryan Tsao at BioStrategyPartners.org. So thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.